was not here too. All right, cool. So these are 5 problems that Tolentino identifies with the internet, right? You're going to choose one of these problems, whichever one you want since you're at home. So whichever one you are most interested in. You're going to put the problem in your own words. I'm going to write this in the chat box too, so that you can remember the different rules here. Okay, 1, put the problem in your own words. 2, think of an example, preferably real, that illustrates that this is a problem. Or 3, think of an example, again, preferably real, that illustrates the opposite. So if you have the first one, for example, about distending your sense of identity, swelling your sense of identity, you're going to think of an example that shows that the internet actually shrinks your sense of identity. And then 4, you're going to decide ultimately, do you think Tolentino is right that this is an effect of the internet? Should have been a question mark. Okay, Luke, let me know in the chat box. Do you understand what you're supposed to do? Okay, awesome. And you'll just put your all your answers to those questions in the chat box. All right, we're gonna go through these problems and hear from each group. And then as we're talking, like, try and sort of get a sense for yourself. Do you think that this is actually a problem, how she's identified it, or do you think that the opposite might be more of a problem? So for you guys, theirs is the internet is built to distend our sense of identity. So again, this is like swelling. So you can think about it kind of like as ego, like your sense of identity is swelling. But what we're talking about over here is it's more about like how everything becomes a part of your identity. So like you can't just like something anymore. It has to be your username. Or you can't just like be interested in something. It's like, now I'm going to join a message group and this is going to be like a part of who I am. So that's part of what she's talking about with that. So what did you guys, what was your examples and your conclusion?
Okay, so for our examples, in support of this, we put TikTok, which is like every video, it's like, oh yeah, I strongly agree with this, something like that. Trump supporters, because they're all gung-ho and all on, and then vegans, because yeah.
Right, it's not just like you don't eat animal products, right? It is that this is who I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for against, we did, I don't know what this one means. I don't know why you explain it.
Vinny Hacker, he's like this guy on TikTok, and
gosh.
everybody shipped for him. Like that was his identity. Like he was just hot, and then it kind of like broke him, and so now he's really sad.
Oh no.
So that was like
How?
So like he's been sad.
It's like everybody finds somehow.
So it was a way that because he got too much attention online, which like might have been an initial swelling of identity, because he got all of that attention, it sort of diminished his own sense of himself, because he's kind of like, I just read a memoir by an old actor, Rob Lowe, who's like, have you guys watched Parks and Rec?
Yes,
Rob Lowe is, what's his name in Parks and Rec?
Someone.
The guy who ends up marrying Ann Perkins.
Ben.
What's his name?
No.
I don't know.
Oh.
Anyway, that's Rob Lowe. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Chris.
Oh.
I
Chris.
read his thing,
Chris.
his memoir, and he was talking about the same thing. He was saying that like at first he was in all of these movies as a child. He was in The Outsiders. Did you guys watch The Outsiders movies when you were reading that book? Rob Lowe is one of those boys in The Outsiders. And so he like has this really great view of himself. It's like, I am an actor, I am going to be huge, like everyone loves me. And then very quickly realized that the people who loved him didn't actually know who he was. And so it actually like made him way sadder to have a fan base than if no one had known who he was, because it was like they're all objectifying me, they all think they love me, but if they got to know me they probably wouldn't. And so it's this like really diminishing idea. So what did you guys ultimately decide?
We decided that she was right. It's worse for some people than other people, but overall everyone does it a little bit, so we decided she was right.
The argument I see there too is that if it were true that everyone's self-esteem or a sense of identity was destroyed by the internet, then we wouldn't be on the internet as much. I don't think we're as masochistic as that, where we would just like be online like, I hate every moment of this. I'm very sad. It seems more likely that when we get on TikTok and like their algorithm is amazing. Did we talk about that in this class?
Yeah, it's great.
It's crazy good. It gets me like it got me really quickly. And you'll see those ones every once in a while that's like, you know, if you're here, it means this about yourself. And I'm just like, yeah, it almost feels like an accurate version of a horoscope. And in that way, then like I think it really does like capture what your identity is and blows that up so that that becomes you now. I am this person who likes, for some reason, it knows that I like apples. So I get lots of apple TikTok. It's bizarre. Do you guys get apple TikToks? Maybe that's just what I thought. Yeah, like apple taste tests and stuff. Yeah, that's, and I'm like, yes, I love this. This is what I wanted. So that becoming like an apple eater has become part of my identity. That's stupid. So I think GT on the TikTok would agree with me. That is stupid. And it's also kind of dangerous for these other reasons. So let's go to the second one. So I think this one builds off the last. The problem is the internet encourages us to overvalue our opinions. All right, so what was your example for that?
We said like, oh yeah, we reworded it to say that the internet makes you think you are actually are.
Mhm.
An example was we also use TikTok. We said people on TikTok see a video that they like really hype it up. So like a Republican sees a Republican video, and that just makes that Republican even more Republican. So that's where it was right.
Okay.
And then something that was kind of against that, YouTube, they have videos where they're like, there's people telling you to look at all the ideas and you'll never set online. So there's the internet telling you something else.
Good. So what did you ultimately decide about this one?
We ultimately decided that yes, she was right. Because, I mean, even ads, like not even just TikTok, just algorithms in general.
Yeah.
Every single ad that you get is like based on for you. So you
Yeah.
see something that you agree with over and over again, it just makes you think you know what it actually are.
So this is fascinating to me because the way that you're saying it overvalues opinions is that you have an opinion, and because you see all of these other people sharing your opinion, this sort of like props up you to think that your opinion is correct now because all of these other people must agree with me. Yeah. Is there, and I think that's a great reading of it, to think of it that way. Is another way to think of the word overvalue and how that process might work with overvaluing your opinions? And this is for other groups. Cooper?
You kind of see your opinions, and because these algorithms are now only throwing things that you like, you agree with, you begin to think, oh, this is fact. Sometimes your opinions make you don't understand the difference between what you like to hear and what's the truth.
Okay, yeah.
And this is true for all sides, but you look at it and you get constantly bombarded, so you get to a point where you're like, well, this is all right. Everybody else I hear from thinks this is right, so I must be correct and right.
So this group right here, you guys were kind of saying that, and that you could go to YouTube then to like try and see multiple sides of a story because YouTube's algorithm is not going to gear towards that as much as like a TikTok algorithm does.
I mean, YouTube does do that, but I was just saying, like, there are people online
They exist.
that are saying not to do that.
Okay.
So they're using the internet against the internet.
Yeah, I could see that.
YouTube was just an example. It
Right,
doesn't have to be
right,
YouTube.
but it could
can
be
on
anywhere.
Instagram.
Yeah. Think about what overvaluing your opinions would look like if you were not using an algorithm. So let's just say you're posting a blog. Is there a way that a blog, do people still have blogs?
Yes, no, not really.
Okay, your moms do. If people post a blog post and people aren't like finding their blogs necessarily through algorithms. I know everything's through an algorithm, but just pretend for a second. How could that start to overvalue someone's opinion? You write your thing on a blog. Yeah.
Because generally people who like agree with it will actually look at it.
Okay, so again, it's like having like an audience that is like clapping for you every time you say something. Yeah.
Yeah, and going along with that, if you have an audience and stuff, you're just gonna say what you think. You're gonna say what you think. People are gonna come to you for your opinion.
Yeah,
So your opinion's then going to be overvalued. So like, say an influencer says something, it immediately becomes fact in so many people's eyes.
yeah,
Overvaluing their opinion.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not they're an expert or they have a lot of experience, it's just, oh, I don't like Starbucks. Oh my God, we're gonna boycott Starbucks.
okay, so even if you're not an influencer, I think it kind of works the same way. Why do we have the gall, the audacity to post online what we ate for lunch? Why do we have the audacity to do that? Like to think other people are going to care about this. It is so egotistical. I'm not saying people don't care, they might, but it's just absurd. Like you would not necessarily tell your friend constantly, well, maybe you would, but I think before the internet, I wasn't taking pictures of all my meals and then like, you know, it was film camera and then like showing my meals to my friend. That is absurd, right? And yet somehow in this sort of like timeline that we've got, we're like, I did this today, I did that, I think this, I think that. There's a way that it kind of like boosts up your opinions just to share them. It's almost like you get to be published. Even though no one has decided your opinion is worth publishing, you have, and you just published it. So everybody gets their own like little platform. And I think in that way, it boosts your opinions too, even if you're not the type of person that has a big following, even if you have 3 people that follow you. And I think we all see that with our weird uncles that post stuff. All right, you guys had the problem. The internet maximizes our sense of opposition. What does that mean?
We said that it means that the internet divides us and like
Okay. So what were your examples?
Our example to say that it does was with the most recent election and how that went, and also if you guys remember when people brought Trump and Confederate flags to the school, like this school, there was lots of Instagram posts about that, fighting back and forth.
So it was kind of like an example of the internet moving into real spaces then.
Yeah.
Those same people might have posted the Confederate flags online and that creates contention. But then does that example also prove the opposite? That actually the internet, the contention in real life is so much scarier than the contention on the internet?
I would say it doesn't.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
there's still like most of the argument stuff that happened about that and just the election in general, most of the like tension that happened with that was all online.
I see, no one was willing to confront those kids in the hallway.
Well, they all can't vote also. So like, if you know,
Yeah.
that's why-
Right.
for both sides.
Right. So it's kind of this weird, like, you did it in real life based on what you learned on the internet, and now the fight is going to be taken back to the internet. Fascinating. All right, what was your other opinion, the opposite opinion, that it doesn't cause contention?
We actually had 2. We said how social media kept us together through quarantine when we were all stuck inside and we all like, you know, that's
Yeah.
We stayed together through social media, and then Tate brought up stuff like GoFundMe and raising awareness for things and how that can bring us together and help people.
Yeah, awesome. So ultimately, what did you decide?
Most of us think that yes, it does divide us, and then one of us
Who's the one of us? Ben, why? Why do you disagree?
Me?
Yeah.
Why it divides us?
Why it brings us closer together then?
Oh, why it brings us closer together like that? Why I say that?
Mhm.
I think that it does separate people as well. I'm not saying that
Right.
it's all great things, but I think that social media does a lot better for us as a society than it does worse. And I think it pulls a lot of people closer against a common enemy. And that might be the thing that we're going against. But I think the fact that we all come together against that common enemy to divide us between that common enemy is more important than us not coming together like that.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. So like eat the rich. It's like the rich is this abstract common enemy idea, right? And so everyone kind of comes together on that idea, not everybody, but a lot of people, and that creates this sense of like not of contention.
Yeah, it's not like, obviously the internet's not perfect. Everybody's still gonna get fights and still go at each other. But I also think it's also better that everyone shares ideas
Mhm.
and has that open mind rather than just kind your own little bubble, like at home. or
Yeah.
not, And keeping your ideas to yourself. I think it's better to always argue with people in
Yeah.
a respectful way, obviously.
Well,
I
and
think it does help everybody kind of come to a better sense of unity.
yeah, I kind of am thinking of myself as like kind of a loserish kid. We got the internet when I was 14. So like kind of like a loner kid through junior high. Junior high was rough. Junior high was probably rough for some of you too. You guys are nerdy.
I don't know. What you
Yeah, what are you talking about? But you know, it was kind of like it was quite a lonely existence, you know. And I felt like everyone was opposed to me and who I was. And I don't think it was true. I don't think they even thought about me, but I kind of had this rebellious sort of like everyone hates me attitude. And then when we got the internet, I was able to find commonalities with people in all different kinds of places because we had AOL chat rooms, which was the most fun thing ever. And we got to like make friends with people in Israel and, you know, and whatever. And it seemed much safer back then than it does now for a 14-year-old to be doing that. But like you kind of find these commonalities then rather than what divides you. I think that's a good argument. Sam, what were you gonna say about it?
Well, I was just saying that I think the internet was a little bit too much power for our generation because, like, you can say one thing online and you can destroy somebody's entire existence.
Yeah.
And like, the negative effect is worse in real life because it carries on from social media to real life.
Mhm.
So I just don't think it's. I think it hurts more than it benefits. I think there are a ton of really good benefits to it.
Yeah.
But at least our generation specifically uses it more to hurt rather than to help.
It does seem that a lot of the contentions that have been arising lately would never have arisen if they hadn't started on the internet first.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the number 4 problem. Internet cheapens our understanding of solidarity. What does that mean in your own words? So the example. Yeah, I think that's a good example. Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately, what did you guys think about that? Like you can find. Yeah. Yeah, and I was actually most interested in how you guys particularly were going to feel about the number 4 problem, this idea of cheapening our understanding of solidarity, that a friendship made online and kept online is not as real or not as valuable as a friendship that you make in real life, and that you actually physically talk to the person, either through the phone or like in person or whatever. What does the rest of the class think about that? Because they're saying like, no, there's a lot of value. It's not cheap to have these kind of internet relationships. Cooper?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, just because you get to know somebody, there's a relationship and a bond there. You may not be able to physically interact with them, but there's still a lot of things now. There's a lot of multiplayer things. There's a lot of chat rooms. There's a lot of activities. And especially over quarantine, you kind of flip the script. Everybody's online now. So is that any different between interacting with the people you've met in real life online than the people that you've met online interacting?
Yeah. If it wasn't any different though, would we all be anxious for quarantine to end? Like, wouldn't we be just perfectly fine then online? Or is it because we've made real life friends that it's not as valuable? But if we had always existed just online, it would be perfectly fine. Yeah, okay, Mallory?
I don't know. A friendship that you would make real life
Why?
because I feel like when you are face like it's online, yeah, you may have to comment, whatever. But I feel like if you are doing things
Oh, because you're in the
able to
same,
get together and you're able to go and experience stuff together rather than sitting online and having to like play an online game with this person. Like when you have a real life connection like that, you can go outside, go have an adventure together.
so it's sharing a setting then, that is important there. Interesting, Christian?
At all because
Right. Right, so it's like for people, I mean, it's kind of, it's kind of ableist to say then, I don't like using those kind of ist words, but it is like a little bit ableist to say that that relationship then is cheaper than a different relationship because they're not capable of having that better relationship, you know? Allie and then to Nathan.
and so in that way you
Yeah, yeah, I'm thinking of people that I've met online versus in real life, and we don't start to develop that common mode of communicating, like the like inside joke based slang that you kind of develop with each other. Yeah, David?
I mean, what I was gonna say is pretty much already been said, but I also agree that like relationships in real life are definitely a lot more valuable because even because Mallory said, like you get to experience those things together in real life. If you think about it, you like playing games and stuff, you still get to have experiences with those people. But I think if you look at it like for example, I do play games a lot. Playing a game with someone that I know in real life rather than playing a game with someone I've met online and have talked to for a bit is completely different. And I mean, like I said, it's pretty much all been said already.
Oh, okay. But it's kind of, you have those things that you can reference from your real life that come into playing the game. It becomes a richer experience. Yeah.
I think that like I have relationships that I used to have like an in-person relationship and now I only talk to those people
Yeah.
online. And I don't the relationships I have with them now that are more online are still valuable.
Yeah.
But it's more because I don't want to let go of the connection we used to have.
Yeah.
So I think it's like online connections are more like a substitute.
And I think she is explicitly talking about that here too. This cheapens our understanding of solidarity. I think it's about how instead of checking up on a friend and having to like actually call them and like show this kind of like this bravery at this point to use the phone, right? And actually talk to them that way. That this is that it kind of, the internet gets us off the hook for those kinds of interactions, and I can feel just as close to my friend by like checking up once a month and be like, you good, through text, and that's going to be like as valuable. There is a joy, and I say this as an older person who has been able to do this with social media. There is a joy in getting rid of old friends. They're fine, like I like them, they're good people and we had fun, right? But like there is something like so freeing about just being like, yeah, I'm done with Amy. Meets my friend. I shouldn't have been real there because I'm recording it. I can say like I'm done with Amy, right? Because we had our time in college and we were really, really good friends, and I wish the best for her, but like it takes up energy to keep in contact with her, right? And because it takes so much energy, I'm trying to keep in contact with everyone I've ever known. I think that's part of what she talks about with this idea of cheapening, that you can like you've spread yourself socially too thin, that kind of an idea. Get rid of some friends. It's nice. Carson.
Shoot, I forgot. So going off of Anya's point,
Yeah.
like an example is I have a cousin and he lives in Logan.
Yeah.
So we don't get to see each other much. And when we were little kids, we were always like best friends because we're about the same age. We're doing little kid stuff. Little kids, doesn't matter who they
They
are. they'll always get
immediately
along.
connect. Yeah.
Yeah, and whenever we meet up in person now, it's only usually like once or twice a year. Whenever we meet up in person, or like I'll call him or something, I can tell it's kind of awkward, and I'm not really myself because I don't know how he's changed. He doesn't know how I've changed, so I just kind of want to stay the same way I was when we were super tight.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me act like I act like a seventh grader, super dumb and immature. And
Yeah.
then he does the same, and I can tell it's neither of us are really like that, but we only see each other only so often where we're not really willing to address it and have like a weird conversation and change.
You can be yourself now.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll come.
Yeah.
But I feel like those types of interactions where it exists online, but only like you don't want to change it. Well, I guess you can't change it online.
Yeah.
I feel like those aren't as valued as in person, just because you'll never really know the other person, and they'll never really know you.
Yeah. Let's keep that idea in mind because I think that's what Gia Tolentino is really thinking about when she thinks about how there are no like dark corners anymore to kind of hide in, and how you kind of have to stay consistent in order to be like an understandable person online. So we'll come back to that. Okay, last problem. It says the internet destroys our sense of scale. What does that mean?
So kind of what we had figured out is like with the phone, we have everything at our fingertips, but that makes us feel like we're very
Oh.
like every single problem we have to know about, and everything that's going on, we are aware.
Yeah. Yeah, so even like really tiny little problems, like I don't know, Dr. Seuss, we think is going to be like the biggest
Exactly.
issue. Okay, yeah. So give me examples and counterexamples.
So the one that we found, actually, Dr. Seuss was a great example.
Oh, thank you.
But the one we came up with was the murder hornets, because they found like
Yes.
murder hornets, but yet we blew it out of so big proportion that it was gonna be the second wave of the pandemic with murder hornets flying all over.
Right.
We just blew it so out of proportion that it just goes to show that the scale no longer makes any sense. People can blow things out of proportion very easily if people will believe it,
Yeah.
or they can understate it to a point where it no longer matters.
So is that the counter argument, the understatement idea?
No, it's still blowing it up. It's still changing the scale.
Got it.
but
Okay.
It's just on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Awesome. So then what was the idea that it doesn't destroy our sense of scale? That's a tough one.
We couldn't exactly find a clean example for this. There are some times that it'll bring you back down to earth. Like something will happen to somebody and you'll be like, this brings me back to reality and something like that. Like a death of somebody that you found out over the internet or something like that. I can't think of a perfect example.
That's a great point though.
But like it's hard to find a clean example that's like, this is exactly what's going on. We get lost so much in the understatement and the overstatement of everything in the turmoil going around it.
Maybe an example could be the internet itself. That when you really think about the internet itself and you realize the scale of what the internet actually is, that you can finally recognize what a small piece of the puzzle you actually are, how minimal your existence actually is. And that maybe is a more accurate version of scale then. Tate?
I think another thing that it does is like for famous people, it makes them seem like they're
Yeah.
and so when they died, like when Kobe died, that was like really eye-opening.
Did you see a lot of famous people responding to that and
Yeah,
made it
like-
seem personal?
Even though nobody, like I knew, nobody really knows it. That NBA players, you're gonna like take it personally.
Yeah.
So I guess that could be like how it takes it out of scale.
Yeah, I think so. Like reminds you that you are a person, that you're mortal. Yeah. Okay. Let's just talk I think we need to talk a little bit about her overarching argument then. So the first couple pages of Tolentino's essay are all about the positives of the internet. She is like relishing the internet and expressing so much joy about it. So what are some of the positives that she presents in the beginning? What are good parts of the internet that she seems to enjoy at the beginning of her essay? Yeah, Kirsten.
Well, something I wrote is that she's really nerdy and like even in the third paragraph, she's like starting to master the internet.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives people, I don't know, something new that they're good at, I guess.
Yeah, something new to get good at. And something here to kind of like express your expertise, like show off a little bit.
Yeah.
She likes that. Okay, yeah, no,
Something kind of in the first
yeah,
I think that positive was that you do have a little bit of that space where you can have, I'm gonna make this
yeah.
that's just the way that I want it to be.
Good, so there's personal expression there, right? It's just another means for us to express ourselves. So we can express ourselves in the way that we dress or the music we listen to or the website that you make. Okay, what else seems to be good about the internet according to her in the beginning? Christian? Yeah, okay, so not as contentious here at the beginning. Yeah, definitely. Anything else you want to point out? What about just the fact that she is an older person looking back on all of these different websites that she has and she can still find them and she can still look at them? Could that be seen as a positive? Yeah, okay, so stays with you forever is usually something that we use to warn kids.
Like I was like, realizing as I was reading through this, and I was like, but that is such a positive one.
Yeah, so what could be the positives of it? We tell people to keep journals, don't we? Like, what could be the positives of this? Cooper?
You can go back and look at things you used to do as a kid, but like thinking about our generation, everything's been turned off, shut down, and Adobe Flash is gone. So you can't do it.
You can't see it anymore. It hasn't even been archived anywhere. I found my live journal when I was thinking about this class.
I think it is archived somewhere, but like it's a little bit harder to access now.
Okay, so in that way, it doesn't quite work the same way that she is talking about here, right? But there is something like joyful and nostalgic about going back and looking at your younger self. Did any of you keep a diary or a journal when you were younger? It's a joy, isn't it?
I found one the other day. I don't know who I thought was gonna read it,
Uh-huh.
but I was very convinced that there were people that were going to.
You were writing to an audience.
Yes.
To your children and their
I
grandchildren.
would like explain acronyms. Like I would be like LOL and then like in brackets laughing at
So you were writing it as a historical document.
100%.
Wonderful. That's going to be very useful in 300 years when someone digs up your journal. Yeah.
So I started keeping a journal in fourth grade.
Yeah.
And I've written all of them.
Amazing. So why? Why do you do it?
Because honestly, it's a lot of work, and
Yeah.
like I'm looking back at it now because I want to like college. It's like 90 stuff that is going to take a long time.
Yeah. Do you enjoy reading your old journals?
Sometimes I cringe.
It's a little bit cringy. Okay, so part of it then, can we see where you were and where you've come, or how far you've come? Right, so one reason that it is nice, I think, to read my old journals, I had to get a lot of space from it. It's like 15 years space from it. But it's kind of nice to read that and be like, I was such an idiot. I was such a moron back then. I was mean. I was kind of a bully a little bit, and it makes you like hurt. Like you're just like, wow, I feel a little guilty for this. I'm cringing a little bit at my behavior. But you also then get to see like the lessons that you learned and how you've grown into a better person. I think looking at that kind of narrative arc of your life can feel really satisfying, can make you feel like you've got purpose, like you are going somewhere. You know, you're not just a stagnant person who's always going to stay the same. You're going to learn lessons and you're going to get better. And I think like that might be part of the reason like people tell you to keep a journal, and it might be part of the reason that it is a joy to keep a journal and you want to keep track of those things. Mallory?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because for me, it's not a journal, but for me, I think
Okay, same kind of deal.
ever since I was little, my mom yeah, like you can remember what happened and everything. And so like I'm not the best writer ever. So instead I decided I actually go back now and move back to all yeah, and just like, okay, I like as much part to even write anything down. There's a picture of like I can get a story.
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, my life now starts in sixth grade and I could start writing.
Good. So there's this idea that it like reaffirms your existence then. That's fascinating. Because if there weren't picture evidence, then you couldn't prove that you aren't just artificial intelligence come into this world at the age of 6, right? Yeah. So it's like reaffirms that you were here, that people had relationship, like that people loved you, that people took care of you. It shows you that you had joys in your past. So if you're ever having a bad day, you can look back through those pictures and be like, but I was happy then, and that was a good feeling, and kind of like recreate that for yourself. Person?
So I don't know if this specifically counts, but I have a close group of 4 friends, and none of us have vividly kept a journal, but we tell so many stories. Like every time we meet up, we tell so many stories over and over again.
Yeah.
Kind of acts the same way.
Yeah.
Like, we'll have just hours and hours talking about stuff we did in elementary school, stupid stuff we did in junior high, stuff like that that kind of acts the same way.
Yeah.
Because even though it's not written down on paper, you can still be like, oh, remember when you threw the scooter on top of the portable?
Yeah.
Got really
That was you guys?
And there's can we get Officer Burns up here? Is this something that we're gonna turn him in for?
I was wondering that. No, I just remember seeing a scooter when I went to East Lake. On a portable, I was like,
Right.
who was up there doing tricks or something?
So there's a joy then in reminiscing.
Yeah.
That like thinking back, okay, why though? Why is there a joy in reminiscing? Oh, okay, so thinking about things in a more simple way. Yeah, removing it kind of from the emotional intensity that existed in that moment and looking back on it, you can kind of feel it more rationally too. Like at the time, the O.J. Simpson trial wasn't funny at all, but looking back, we can make plenty of jokes about the O.J. Simpson trial, and I could be like, remember this about it? And everyone in my generation like laughs about a woman being murdered. You know, like there's a kind of way that it removes the emotion and you're able to kind of just like enjoy who you used to be. And I think that happens with her here too, where she, at the time she was going through some things, but now she looks back, she's just like, oh, I love that glittery effect I put on this. Then and then Christian.
When you're reminiscing, it's a happy thing. It's not like,
Yeah.
hey man, remember my dog died? Like, no. It's all happy stuff.
So it's kind of, you're recreating that happy memory from, and even if with the dog dying, right? You don't say, remember when my dog died. You might say that. We reminisce sometimes about sad things, but it's more like, oh, remember when my dog did this? And like it's at least like a little happy. It might be tinged with sadness, with the nostalgia, but it's happy, and you're kind of reliving that, recreating the emotion for yourself. Christiane?
I feel like that's with my outfit journal. Like even though I like
Yeah.
like there's things like okay, if I can figure out or there's a spider on my helmet when I was trying to go to school. Like
Yeah.
it reminds me of these things that aren't really connected. It's still there.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it's a little bit explaining who you are to yourself a lot. Like even though it might not be like why you're in AP Lang, you saw a spider and now you're in AP Lang, right? It's not that. But it still creates this kind of story of your life where it feels like things that haven't just happened to you randomly now. That you actually, you have some control over who you've become. You can kind of trace how you ended up where you are. Okay, what we're talking about here is the self and your identity. And we're saying that identity isn't just something that you are right now, but identity is what is called palimpsest. Palimpsest is usually a word that we use for talking about documents. So it is when somebody has, like, let's say you have this piece of paper and someone puts like whiteout all over it or like blacks it out, but there's still like, you can still see the text through the whiteout or through the blackening of text. But instead of just them throwing it away, someone will write on top of that, and then they'll wipe that out, and they'll write on top of that. So there's always like traces of what's underneath. This was important when paper was rare. So there's kind of like traces as it's building up, right? So if the self is like a palimpsest, it's like, are you who you are right now? And well, let me ask you this. Have you changed since you were a kid? Are you a different person than you were as a kid?
Absolutely no.
And that's the deal, right? Like, it's like, are you or are you not? It's kind of a strange thing to say. I don't make the same decisions that I made when I was a kid, and yet I did have those experiences, and I recorded them here. So I know I had those experiences, and now I am who I am. So does that mean that I am still the same person, evolved, but still the same person? Does that inner child still exist within me? Or am I now a completely different person, and I have erased the younger self? Yeah.
So that was just super easy paradox.
Yes. Explain it.
So the Super PC is the board that you actually walked around, the ships that you actually walk around, and over time they rot, and you have to replace them. So over time they've replaced all the wood on that ship. Is it still the same ship?
Exactly. They talked about that in WandaVision, right? Yeah. When he said something like it's have you heard of this paradox or whatever? And I said like, oh, they're going to talk about the ship of Theseus. And my husband's never been more like equally repelled and impressed by me. He was just like, you are a nerd. That's kind of cool, but gross. But yeah, it's this idea that like if you keep replacing little parts of this ancient artifact, when does it stop being the ancient artifact and become the new thing? And that's kind of this idea of the self and the identity. Okay, I promise this relates to Gia Tolentino. Go to the page 7. And there's two very important sections to this that we should talk about before we get to the end. It says, so she's talking about this text about the self being performance, right? So just to add to this, it's not just that the self and the identity is palimpsest, but the performance of self is also a palimpsest. So you have performed different versions of yourself at different points in your life. And Goffman says, like, we're performing all the time. Like, there's no escaping a performance. You're always going to be performing. But like, and whether or not you would believe that, you do know, like, we have to put on different versions of ourselves in different settings. I think I have talked about that in here before. Like, I'm not the person I put. Okay, yeah. So anyway, look at the bottom of the first full paragraph. Actually, look at the top. It says, offline, there are forms of relief built into this process. Audiences change over. The performance you stage at a job interview is different from the one you stage at a restaurant later for a friend's birthday, which is different from the one you stage for a partner at home. So that kind of relief, that sometimes it feels more like you're performing and sometimes it doesn't, and that you get to change up the performance, that is healthy for us. We should have that. But when you are online, she is saying that is not the case. You're not changing audiences because yourself is always on display. So it is like you took the journal and you published it online and you were like, this is myself, right? And you don't get to then switch up that performance. And it says the self at the bottom of that paragraph. The self is not a fixed organic thing, but a dramatic effect that emerges from a performance. The effect can be believed or disbelieved at will. When you are performing your version of the self, you need people to believe your version of the self, right? And if they don't, that's when you get called fake. That's when they're like, well, this isn't really you. I can tell, like I can see like through the veneer that you're putting on, the facade, I can see that that's not really you. So look down at the end of the second full paragraph. It says, the everyday madness perpetuated by the internet is the madness of this architecture, which positions personal identity as the center of the universe. It's as if we've been placed on a lookout that oversees the entire world and given a pair of binoculars that makes everything look like our own reflection. Through social media, many people who have quickly come to view all new information as a sort of direct commentary on who they are, so that every single thing that you see online is kind of adding to your performance of self. Okay, turn the page. And this paragraph starts, selfhood buckles. And then go down to the part where it says people who maintain. It's kind of at the end of this first big paragraph. People who maintain a public internet profile are building a self that can be viewed simultaneously by their mom, their boss, their potential future bosses, their 11-year-old nephew, their past and future sex partners, their relatives who loathe their politics, as well as anyone who cares to look for any possible reason. Identity, according to Goffman, is a series of claims and promises. On the internet, a highly functional person is one who can promise everything to an indefinitely increasing audience at all times. Incidents like Gamergate are partly a response to these conditions of hyper visibility. And then look at the very end, Werner Herzog tells GQ, German filmmaker, we have to have our dark corners and the unexplained. We will become uninhabitable in a way an apartment will become uninhabitable if you illuminate every single dark corner and under the table and wherever. You cannot live in a house like this anymore. Okay, I just read a bunch of stuff to you. What is she saying in that section? How does it apply to what we've been talking about here with the kind of combination of selves adding up? What do you think her argument is about the problem with the internet? Mallory? Yes.
I think that a lot of times we don't even know what our
Yep.
and so we always like
Exactly. And she's saying that's great that you're a different person in different situations. That's healthy. You shouldn't be able to say, this is me in every single situation. That's like a psychopathic thing to do. You know, if you're the exact same person with your grandma as you are with your best friend, it's weird. Psychopathic is not right, but it's not normal to do that. And it's because the self is not fixed, that sometimes we like things and sometimes we don't. You know, one day my favorite TV show is The X-Files. The next day my favorite TV show is WandaVision, and that is fine. You don't have to have that kind of consistency. But imagine you built your social media profile then. Like, what are you going to say about yourself in that social media profile? And now once you've built it, don't you have to kind of live up to what you have said in that profile? And you can't escape that. So you kind of have this self then that becomes permanent. And if you add on to it, like you erase it, you do the whiteout and you erase it and you add another layer, everyone else is still going to be able to see the other versions of yourself. And what is the accusation going to be?
What happens when
I always go with the person who I need to be most careful around. So I become Grandma Whitney instead of best friend Whitney, I think, right?
Yeah.
But maybe it's like a comboable. So I mean, you have this like layer of yourselves, and this self at the top contradicts what you said underneath. Someone is going to accuse you then of being inauthentic. Like, or someone's going to go even scarier for celebrities, especially. Someone's going to go into that past and say, you said this racist thing in 1993, so now this self at the top is illegitimate, and we want nothing to do with this self now, right? And so there's no dark corners. You can't change the performance at any time. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, you've had your hand up forever. All right. So that's kind of like her argument here is that like all of these problems stem from the fact that you are exposing your identity online. Yes.
I mean, to an extent, that's true.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pasts that have been erased just because the people wanted it to be erased.
Ooh.
So like in the 2020 election,
Uh-huh.
like people would bring up things Trump said in like 1990, and they'd be like, "Oh, he was a horrible person. He said this 30 years ago." But then if somebody on the other side tried to bring up something Biden said, they're like, "Oh, well, he's changed."
But isn't there a side in that kind of that identity war too? Isn't there a side that will hold on to that thing that Biden said as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like the dominant versus the not dominant perspective, but there's still like a good portion of the population that's going to hold Biden into account for those things too, I think. And I think Gia Tolentino would say like, wouldn't it be nice if there were some things that we could move on from and say, well, that person has changed. They don't have that view anymore. And so we're going to allow them to do that change. What do you guys think of that? Because in some ways, like, I'm kind of glad when people get canceled. Like, there are some people that, like, I'm glad we dug that up from the past because it seems to reveal something essential about them. But, I mean, if they aren't that person anymore, then maybe we shouldn't. Yeah.
Social media might expose what we were in the past, but it also could help expose what you have done to overcome that and change to be the way you currently are.
Yeah.
So if you can see that they haven't changed, at that point, I think that you do not deserve it. And that's when you should like come up and say, no, stop.
Yeah.
This is it. But if they said something 30 years ago and since then they've been getting better and now they're just a very acceptable person that everyone's like, there's not an issue with, then we shouldn't hold them accountable for that because it was so long ago.
Can you change day to day though? And show like, well, I'm this way with one person, but I'm this way with another person, and can that be legitimate?
Well, okay, so
Well,
I'm gonna,
yeah, it's like comparing. So if you're gonna compare emotions like that, then that's like comparing weather to climate. Weather changes day to day, but climate as a whole stays consistent.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I like that. So Gia Tolentino would be saying that your weather then is determining your happiness online. That the changes from day to day, people are using that against you. But you're saying that as long as the climate is showing like a general trend, that people might accept those kind of changes from you. Fascinating. Yeah, Cooper.
So, talking about the people who have gone from a place of like, they were in a bad position and then they have worked themselves out of it.
Mhm.
Like, one of the biggest examples that I immediately thought of was RDJ. The man was going in jail, he had a major drug problem.
Who is it?
RDJ, Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But like that stuff. Now he's like one of the most liked and agreeable.
Because people love that story.
Yes.
Okay.
As long as
Yeah.
you have to, I think you have to kind of do it right. You can't it's very complicated and it is very scary and sketchy that you have to be so careful about it.
Yeah. But even in this scenario, you are describing a kind of consistency
Yeah.
arc that he has to build.
Mhm.
And if tomorrow he wants to have a drink with his friends and someone takes a picture of that and puts that online, it destroys Robert Downey Jr. because he's created that arc. Right?
No, but that's still in his persona. He is still very much the diva queen that he is.
Oh, okay.
This is
Okay,
not-
as long as it fits with your
Yeah,
persona.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay, Sam.
Well, then it goes into how powerful you are. Because Robert Downey Jr. could go, and maybe he could even have a relapse, and people be like, "Oh, but he played Iron Man."
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of a John Mulaney situation,
We
right?
can't
Where we're
lose
willing
that,
to be.
But yet,
Yeah.
there could be some like mom that lives in your neighborhood that had an affair, and then suddenly, like everybody hates her. Like they're like, "Oh, she's disgusting," and then even like 10 years later, she moves somewhere else, and somehow that information gets there, and then again, suddenly, "Oh, she's disgusting for a mistake that she."
I think that's
10 years
exactly
ago.
what Tolentino is talking about. Yeah, and the ways that public mistakes have now become, or not public, private mistakes have absolutely become public because of the ubiquitousness of the internet. That everything is online now, and the way things can move into online spaces and private spaces like very easily. There's no
There
like
are some
barrier.
good things about that, like the sex offenders list is public.
Yeah, there we go. Now we know which kid, like which houses the kids don't knock on the doors, right? Yeah.
so this is more like her story, but like my dad had we worked for him and she had posted something when she was young, like 19 and stuff, but now she's older and she's like from posted something, she was like really young when she was a teenager. Of a picture of her dressed up as someone. Then in a friend group online, she had said something that offended one person. And so this big group went against my dad saying, you better get rid of her. If you don't get rid of her, we're gonna start leaving awful reviews. And like, they went after my dad because he had fired her.
Yeah.
And so he ended up having to get rid of her. So he couldn't ruin his public image.
Uh-huh.
But then a bigger company said, we will take her on because we will fight that. Because that,
So that's
She was
where
a
the
young
money
kid.
and the celebrity can come in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
then it's my gal. I forget.
yeah.
That's what Ben Shapiro's doing.
What, rehabilitating people?
He's taken a whole bunch of canceled actors, like the actors from and they're gonna make a movie and other TV shows off.
I mean, it'll be fascinating to see the way that capitalism takes that on, right? Like, are people going to see it? Is it gonna, okay, so what I want you to do now, at the bottom of the Tolentino essay, or anywhere where you have space, I think the bottom, there's enough space for this. So I want you to return to the question that we asked at the very beginning of class. How much of your online self is within your control? To what extent do you have control over the narrative of your online self? And I want you to answer that in a thesis statement now. So we're not talking about you personally anymore. It's not about like, this is my experience with the internet. It's kind of like a general view. To what extent do people have control of the narrative of themselves online? And try and answer that in a thesis statement.
I guess.
Okay, so Luke, you too, write a thesis statement at the bottom.
Extra?
Yeah, you want to say hi? This doesn't have his camera on, so we don't know.